Hello everyone.
We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin.
My name is Spencer.
The moment my wife of many years told me she had never really loved me and was going back to her ex-boyfriend was the moment I understood that my entire adult life had been built on a foundation of lies, but instead of collapsing into anger or desperation, I simply nodded and began the quiet process of reclaiming what's left of my life. Carmen and I had been married since we were both in our 20s. Back then, we were young and optimistic about building a life together. Our son was now 18 and had just started his freshman year at a state university, leaving Carmen and me to navigate the empty nest phase of our marriage and rediscover who we were as a couple. On the surface, our marriage had seemed steady in all the unremarkable ways that long-term relationships often become after the initial passion fades. We shared household responsibilities, managed our finances cooperatively, attended our son's school events together, and maintained a sort of partnership that I had assumed represented mature love. Our life together had developed predictable rhythms around work schedules, family obligations, and the routine maintenance of a household and marriage that had lasted nearly 2 decades. Carmen worked as an office manager for a dental practice, while I had built a career in logistics management that provided steady income and a reasonable work-life balance. We would have dinner together most evenings, watch television or read, and sometimes discuss the practical aspects of our daily lives. But looking back now, I can see that what I had interpreted as comfortable stability was actually emotional distance that had been growing between us for years without my conscious recognition. Carmen had been going through the motions of married life while apparently longing for something or someone else entirely, though she had never given me any clear indication that she was unhappy or unfulfilled in our relationship. The revelation that would destroy my understanding of our marriage came during a discussion about our family finances. Carmen and I had been reviewing our budget and planning for some home improvements when we began disagreeing about priorities and spending allocations. Carmen wanted to renovate the kitchen with expensive appliances and custom cabinetry, while I thought we should focus on more practical improvements like replacing the aging HVAC system and updating the electrical wiring. These kinds of financial disagreements weren't unusual for us, and I expected that we would work through our different priorities and reach a compromise that addressed both of our concerns. But as our discussion continued, Carmen became increasingly frustrated and accused me of never listening to her opinions or valuing her input on important family decisions. I tried to explain that I did value Carmen's perspective, but that some of her suggestions about the kitchen renovation didn't seem financially prudent given our current budget constraints and other competing priorities for our home improvement spending. I pointed out that the HVAC and electrical issues were safety and efficiency concerns that should take precedence over aesthetic improvements, even though I understood her desire to have a more attractive and functional kitchen. But Carmen perceived my practical concerns as dismissive and controlling, and she became increasingly angry as our conversation continued. She accused me of treating her like a child who didn't understand money management, and claimed that I had been making unilateral decisions about our finances for years without genuine consideration of her preferences and goals. The argument escalated beyond anything I had expected when Carmen's frustration reached a breaking point, and she delivered words that would completely reframe my understanding of our entire relationship. In an angry tone, Carmen told me that she thinks it's time to go back to her ex-boyfriend, and that she had never really loved me at all. She compared our two and felt that the ex respected her more. Carmen went on to explain that she had only married me because she discovered she was pregnant with our son and didn't want to have an abortion or become a single mother. According to Carmen, I had represented stability and financial security during a time when she was young and scared about her future, but I had never been the person she truly wanted to spend her life with. The clinical, almost businesslike way that Carmen delivered this devastating information was almost as shocking as the content of what she was saying. Her face was completely expressionless as she explained that our entire marriage had been based on practical convenience rather than love, and that she had been pretending to care about me for nearly 2 decades while longing for someone else. My immediate reaction to Carmen's revelation was complete silence. I didn't shout, argue, or beg her to reconsider what she was saying. I simply nodded quietly and tried to process the implications of learning that the woman I had loved and committed my life to had never felt the same way about me. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet as I realized that every expression of love, every moment of intimacy, and every shared dream had been a performance rather than a genuine emotion. Carmen seemed surprised by my lack of reaction to her confession. She stood in our kitchen for several seconds after delivering her bombshell, apparently waiting for me to become upset, argue with her assessment of our marriage, or beg her to reconsider her decision to leave. When I continued to sit quietly without responding, she stormed out of the room with what appeared to be frustration that I hadn't provided the emotional reaction she had been expecting. That night, I moved to our guest bedroom and lay awake staring at the ceiling while trying to understand how I had lived for 17 years with someone who had been fundamentally deceiving me about her feelings and motivations. Carmen's revelation had recontextualized every significant moment of our relationship, making me question whether any of our shared experiences had been genuine or whether I had been living in a carefully constructed illusion. I thought about our son and how this revelation would affect him when he learned that his parents' marriage had been built on a lie from the very beginning. Our son had grown up believing that his parents loved each other and had created their family intentionally, but Carmen's confession meant that even his birth had been viewed by his mother as an inconvenience that forced her into a marriage she didn't want. Carmen made no attempt to reach out to me or discuss her revelation during the days that followed our argument. She continued with her normal routines, going to work and managing household tasks, but she seemed to be waiting for me to process her confession and either accept her decision or fight to change her mind. Her casual attitude about destroying our marriage suggested that she genuinely believed I would eventually adjust to the new reality she had created. But what Carmen apparently didn't understand was that her words had liberated me from trying to maintain a relationship with someone who had never valued our partnership or appreciated the life we had built together. If Carmen had been pretending to love me for 17 years while longing for someone else, then our marriage had already been over long before she finally admitted the truth. Carmen's confession also explained many aspects of our relationship that had never quite made sense to me. She had always talked about her ex-boyfriend with a wistfulness and nostalgia that seemed excessive for someone who had supposedly moved on to a happy marriage. Carmen would describe this ex as her first true love and wonder aloud what might have happened if circumstances had been different when they were younger. I had always felt somewhat uncomfortable about Carmen's obvious continued emotional investment in her ex, but I had rationalized these feelings as normal nostalgia that didn't threaten our marriage. Now I understood that Carmen's romanticization of her past relationship reflected ongoing feelings that had never been resolved, and that my discomfort had been justified rather than possessive or insecure. By the third day after Carmen's revelation, I had made the decision not to beg, argue, or try to engage her in a conversation to reconsider her assessment of our marriage. If Carmen had never loved me and viewed our entire relationship as a settling for security rather than a genuine partnership, then there was nothing I could say or do that would create authentic feelings that had never existed. Instead of pursuing reconciliation, I began researching divorce attorneys and planning for the practical aspects of ending our marriage. I contacted a family law attorney and scheduled a consultation to understand the legal and financial implications of dissolving a 17-year marriage with shared assets and an adult child. I also threw myself into work with renewed focus and energy, taking on additional projects and responsibilities that would keep my mind occupied and provide financial security during what I knew would be an expensive and emotionally challenging period. The demands of my job provided a welcome distraction from the personal chaos that Carmen had created. In my free time, I began journaling about our relationship and trying to identify signs that I had missed or rationalized over the years. Writing about our shared history from the perspective of someone who now understood that Carmen had been performing love rather than feeling it helped me recognize patterns of behavior that I should have questioned earlier. I realized that Carmen had always been somewhat emotionally unavailable, more interested in the security and status that our marriage provided than in genuine intimacy and partnership. I wanted more children, but she was hell-bent on just having only one. As I worked through this process of emotional detachment and practical planning, I began to feel a sense of sadness and disappointment at learning that my marriage had been based on deception. Carmen's confession had hurt me deeply in ways I can't explain. When Carmen received the divorce papers that my lawyer had prepared, some days later, her reaction was shock and apparent disbelief that I had taken her words seriously enough to begin legal proceedings. Carmen claimed that she had never meant what she said about not loving me, and that she had only been angry and frustrated when she made those statements. But I walked away from Carmen's attempts to minimize or retract her confession without engaging in discussion or argument. Carmen had shown me who she really was during a moment when her emotional defenses were down, and her subsequent attempts to manage the consequences of her honesty felt manipulative rather than genuine. Later that same day, I received an unexpected phone call from a family friend who had known both Carmen and me since our early married life and who also happened to be a practicing attorney. This friend's voice sounded strained and uncomfortable as he explained that Carmen had asked him to call me on her behalf to discuss our marital problems. He argued that Carmen was devastated by my decision to file for divorce and that she had never meant the hurtful things she had said during our argument. He claimed that Carmen had told him she had never stopped loving me and that she was desperate for an opportunity to repair our relationship and prove her commitment to our marriage. But I responded to this friend's advocacy calmly and definitively, telling him that my mind was made up and that it was already too late for Carmen to undo the damage that her confession had caused. I explained that I deserved to be with someone who chose me fully and genuinely, rather than someone who had settled for me out of convenience and regretted that choice for nearly 2 decades. He seemed surprised by my firm refusal to consider reconciliation, apparently having expected that I would be grateful for any indication that Carmen might be willing to work on our relationship. But Carmen's willingness to have our friend plead her case rather than discussing her feelings with me directly only reinforced my assessment that she was more concerned about avoiding the consequences of her confession than about genuinely rebuilding our marriage. The news of our impending divorce spread quickly through our social circle and extended family, creating divided opinions about whether I was being too harsh in my response to what some people characterized as words spoken in anger rather than carefully considered truth. Carmen's family, predictably, sided with her and argued that I should forgive what they claimed was a momentary lapse in judgment rather than ending our marriage over something she regretted saying. But other friends and family members recognized that anger typically reveals truth rather than creating lies, and that Carmen's confession had probably been the most honest thing she had said to me in years. These supporters understood that someone doesn't invent such specific and devastating lies during an argument, but rather finally admits feelings and thoughts that they have been carefully concealing. My son's reaction to news of our divorce was complicated and painful, as he struggled to understand how his parents' marriage could end so suddenly after appearing stable throughout his childhood. I was careful not to share the specific details of Carmen's confession with our son, not wanting to damage his relationship with his mother or burden him with information that would change his understanding of his own origin story. He expressed sadness about our family breaking apart, but also demonstrated maturity in recognizing that he was legally an adult and that custody arrangements wouldn't affect his life in the same way they might affect a younger child. He made it clear that he didn't want to choose sides between his parents and that he hoped both Carmen and me would find happiness, whether together or separately. As our divorce proceedings moved forward, Carmen's behavior became increasingly desperate and erratic as she apparently began to understand the full implications of losing our marriage and the life we had built together. The woman who had claimed never to have loved me suddenly began fighting harder than she had ever fought for our relationship during the 17 years when she had the opportunity to build genuine intimacy and partnership with me. Carmen's attempts to prevent our divorce included every manipulation tactic I could have imagined, from guilt trips about breaking up our family to nostalgic appeals about the good times we had shared during our marriage. She would remind me of our honeymoon, our son's childhood milestones, and various moments of happiness that she claimed proved our relationship was worth saving despite her moment of honesty about her true feelings. But Carmen's sudden desperation to save our marriage only confirmed that her love for me was conditional and self-serving rather than genuine and unconditional. She had been content to maintain emotional distance and take our relationship for granted when she believed I would always be available, but she only began valuing our partnership when she faced the prospect of losing the security and stability it provided. Most revealing was Carmen's attempt to use physical intimacy as a tool for convincing me to reconsider the divorce. She would initiate physical contact and try to recreate the romantic atmosphere of our early relationship, apparently believing that doing this could substitute for the emotional connection and genuine love that had never existed between us. But these manipulative attempts at reconciliation only made me more certain that ending our marriage was the right decision. Carmen was treating our relationship like a negotiation where she could offer concessions and incentives to change my mind, rather than recognizing that the fundamental problem was her inability to love me authentically rather than strategically. During one particularly emotional conversation, Carmen finally admitted in desperation that she had only said those hurtful things to wound me during our argument, but that my complete emotional withdrawal from her since that night had shown her how much she had taken me for granted. She claimed that seeing me detach so completely had made her realize that she did love me and didn't want to lose our marriage. But I responded to Carmen's confession with the same calm detachment that had characterized all of our interactions since her original revelation. I told her that I no longer saw my wife when I looked at her, because the woman I had thought I was married to had never actually existed. Carmen had revealed herself to be capable of performing love for 17 years while feeling something entirely different and probably cheating on me. Such a person wasn't someone I could trust with my heart or my future. Carmen's breakdown in response to my emotional unavailability was both painful to witness and confirming of my decision to end our marriage. She had never shown such intense emotion about our relationship during the years when expressing genuine feelings might have created real intimacy between us, but she was devastated by the prospect of losing someone she had claimed never to have loved. The contradiction between Carmen's historical emotional distance and her current desperation revealed that she had been taking our marriage for granted in ways that had prevented her from appreciating what she had until it was being taken away. Her grief about our divorce seemed more about losing security and companionship than about losing genuine love and partnership. As our divorce proceedings continued through the complex process of asset division and financial settlement, Carmen's legal team fought aggressively for favorable terms that would maintain her lifestyle and financial security. The woman who had claimed that marrying me had been a mistake was now fighting to retain as many benefits as possible from that allegedly regrettable decision. But I approached the divorce settlement with fairness rather than vindictiveness, understanding that trying to punish Carmen financially would only prolong our legal entanglement and prevent me from moving forward with my life. I wanted a clean separation that would allow both of us to rebuild independently, rather than remaining connected through ongoing conflict or resentment. The custody discussion regarding our son was largely symbolic since our son was already 18 and living independently at college, but the legal framework established visitation schedules and financial responsibilities that acknowledged both parents' ongoing roles in his life. He made it clear that he intended to maintain relationships with both Carmen and me regardless of our marital status. Throughout the months-long divorce process, I maintained the same emotional detachment. I didn't try to hurt or punish her, but I also didn't allow myself to be manipulated by her various attempts at reconciliation or her claims that she had discovered genuine love for me only after threatening to lose me. Carmen's inability to understand that her confession had been liberating rather than devastating seemed to reflect her continued misunderstanding of what authentic love and partnership require. She apparently believed that expressing regret about her honesty would undo the damage it had caused, rather than recognizing that the problem wasn't her moment of truth-telling but the 17 years of deception that had preceded it. On the day our divorce was finalized, Carmen watched with obvious distress as I signed the final papers without hesitation or visible emotion. She had apparently hoped until the last moment that I would change my mind or that her various appeals and manipulations would convince me to give our marriage another chance. But I left the venue for the meeting that day feeling more relief than sadness, understanding that I was finally free from a relationship that had been built on a foundation of lies and maintained through performance rather than genuine feeling. Carmen's confession had ended our marriage, but it had also given me the opportunity to find someone who could love me authentically rather than strategically. The experience taught me important lessons about the difference between being loved and being needed, and about the importance of recognizing when someone is performing affection rather than feeling it genuinely. Carmen had needed me for financial security, social status, and practical partnership, but she had never loved me in the way that creates genuine intimacy and emotional connection. I learned that silence can be more powerful than argument when someone reveals fundamental truths about their character and feelings, and that accepting difficult realities with dignity often produces better outcomes than fighting against truths that can't be changed. Carmen's confession had hurt me deeply, but my quiet acceptance of her honesty had protected me from wasting additional years on someone who wasn't capable of authentic partnership. Most importantly, I discovered that self-respect sometimes requires walking away from people and situations that consistently undervalue your worth and contributions. Carmen had taken our marriage for granted for 17 years, and her sudden appreciation for our relationship only emerged when she realized my desire to end the marriage. The months following our divorce allowed me to rediscover aspects of my personality and interests that had been suppressed during my marriage. Without the constant effort of trying to earn love from someone who was incapable of providing it, I had energy and emotional availability for activities and relationships that brought me genuine satisfaction. Looking back on Carmen's confession that she had never loved me, I realized that her moment of honesty had been a gift that saved me from continuing to invest in someone who would never be able to provide the kind of partnership that marriage is supposed to represent. Her words had been devastating to hear, but they had also freed me from a relationship that was preventing both of us from finding genuine happiness. The years I had spent with Carmen weren't entirely wasted, as they had given me our son and taught me valuable lessons about recognizing authentic versus performed affection. Our son, now thriving in his junior year at college, has maintained good relationships with both of his parents despite our divorce, and he has expressed appreciation for the fact that we handled our separation with dignity rather than subjecting him to ongoing conflict and drama. He seems to understand that sometimes parents are happier apart than together, even when that reality is difficult to accept initially. Even to this day, I don't know if Carmen later reconnected with the ex, whom she claimed to have never gotten over. I found out through mutual friends that he was married with children. The house that Carmen and I had shared throughout our marriage was sold as part of our divorce settlement, and I used my portion of the proceeds to purchase a smaller place that better reflected my individual needs and preferences. 2 years after our divorce was finalized, I occasionally wondered what might have happened if Carmen had never revealed her true feelings about our marriage, but I was grateful that she had chosen honesty over continued deception. Living in a relationship based on lies would have been far more damaging than the pain of discovering those lies and having the opportunity to build something genuine elsewhere. Sometimes the most devastating conversations are also the most liberating, because they force us to stop accepting less than we deserve and to hold out for relationships that honor our worth and value our genuine selves. Carmen's statement had hurt me deeply, but it had also shown me that I deserved better than what she had been able to offer during our 17 years together.